Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me this evening for a March W13 Las Vegas restaurant review. Tonight we'll be dining at Jaleo from world-renowned chef Jose Andres at the Cosmopolitan. Given a choice between bar seating and the dining room as a single diner, I elected a booth towards the back of the main dining floor in the middle of all of the action. The wait staff here is well trained and efficient. Upon seating, one is asked to choose among still, sparkling, and tap water. I chose still. The tasting menu is not particularly emphasized, but it is an excellent value, at least on paper. As you can see, if you do choose still water, they will bring you a glass bottle of Evian. The first course arrived promptly and was a chilled gazpacho. It was significantly creamier than normal gazpacho, not as granular and more velvety in texture, so it was perhaps not quite as fresh and salsa-like as one might be accustomed, but you would expect something a bit different from a restaurant at the Cosmopolitan, especially from a chef like Jose Andres. I found the acidity was well balanced, and it was a good way to start the meal. The gazpacho was paired with a Belle de Flor dry sherry brimming with fortified aromas and woody notes. It was somewhat subdued in the end and made for a surprising combination with the gazpacho, with neither pairing element really overwhelming the other. So, all in all, quite a successful first pairing. Next, the pan con tomate consisted of bread imported from Spain topped with tomato puree and manchego cheese. The bread gave the impression of a sort of high-quality pizza dough, crusted and charred at a very high temperature. In that sense, it's sort of a deconstructed, unmelted Spanish-style pizza, and you could think of it as both exciting in some respects and disappointing, but certainly I found the sherry to be an inappropriate pairing, probably more intended for the gazpacho. Next were a couple of tapas dishes that arrived in close succession. The cuvee, which is a sparkling wine and arrived late, tastes, in a word, cheap. It is rather inexpressive with an indistinctive bouquet. You may get a hint of apple, absolutely no champagne notes, no toast, no brioche, no stone fruit. Pairing-wise, it was serviceable with the two dishes that we'll discuss here in a moment. And the creaminess and richness of the croquettes in particular paired well with the acidity of the cuvee. So the endives with goat cheese and almonds, which I felt were just slightly unbalanced, having been overpowered by the nuts, were okay. I adored the combination of endives, orange, and goat cheese, with the salty, zesty, soft dairy marrying perfectly with the bitterness of the endives and sweet, citrusy acidity of the orange. While the combination of flavors was compelling, I found the individual ingredients rather pedestrian in both quality and seasoning, but the pairing was certainly serviceable with the acidity of the cuvee. The croquetas de pollo were significantly creamier than I expected, filled with savory cheese inside. I wish the exterior had been slightly crispier, and to me the dish could possibly have passed for a microwave dinner, which isn't so great. It just didn't come together for me flavor-wise, if I'm honest. The pairing for the next course, a Chardonnay, actually arrived before the food. First impressions of this wine were a highly vegetal bouquet, almost asparagus-like, with intense minerality and no oak detected. It's quite golden in color. As to the palate, despite exhibiting that classic Chardonnay aftertaste, it's certainly the best wine thus far based purely on complexity and quality, and while not ideal for sipping, it should be wonderful with the next course, which was an apple salad And by far, as you can see, the largest dish. Fortunately, it was bursting with a cornucopia of fresh fruit and vegetables. This is the kind of dish that you hope to have in a larger tasting menu. It is a complex salad with a symphony of subtle contrasting flavors of anise. The acidity from the dressing, the bits of cheese interspersed really transformed the dish, but was also fine without them. And now for presumably the main event, our steak, which I found a little tough and certainly not the best I've had. In the end, it was a bit of a dry, sad, overcooked mess, only slightly improved by the roasted pepper and the sauce accompanying it. Now, the accompanying wine was a Pinot Noir, which on the surface would make for quite an odd pairing with a steak course, but this Pinot wasn't necessarily just any Pinot. It had a nearly indescribable bouquet, unlike any other Pinot I'd experienced. It's extremely oak-forward, it has a lot of old-world charm, and seems more reminiscent of an Italian wine, but in the end it was outstanding on its own as a sipper. But it was far too light to adequately complement the beef, particularly considering the texture and at times overdoneness of the meat, which would have really called for the help of a highly tannic, full-bodied wine like a Cabernet. For dessert, the flan with espuma and oranges may have indeed been the best dish of the night. Now, as a disclaimer, I love dessert and I always appreciate ending the meal on a high note, but when dessert is the highlight of a meal, it sometimes implies the inadequacy of the primary dishes, as in our case you may have detected at times over the course of this meal. But nonetheless, this flan is ridiculously creamy with more of a creme brulee or pot de creme consistency. The oranges complement the dessert extremely well. Overall, it was just outstanding. And just as we began the meal, we ended it with a sherry delivered after the course with which it was intended to be paired. Obviously, this was a dessert sherry, unlike the dry one paired with the first courses, and this one was classic in its nuttiness and sweetness. I thoroughly enjoyed it on its own as an after-dinner drink. Overall impressions were a mixed bag with more minuses than pluses. I'm not sure I would recommend the tasting menu, although it is quite affordable, and I certainly would not suggest the wine pairing. I think with respect to beverages, you're better off ordering a la carte or perhaps consulting a sommelier if available. Jose Andres also offers an innovative selection of signature gin and tonics, which I highly recommend. If you're looking for an unforgettable special dinner, I'm not quite sure this is the place, although it's also open for lunch and the paella is outstanding. I think the other Jose Andres outlets at the Cosmo, both Chino Poblano and A, which is housed in an exclusive space within Jaleo, are far better experiences. So in the end, I'll leave it up to you, but if you do patronize this restaurant, please tell me about your experience. Until then, safe travels and good eats. March W13 out.